and welcome to Parashat Miqes. We entitled today's class, Seeing the Light, because I'd like to also bring in the Chanukah message, which is permeating throughout the Parasha if we look for it. Today's class is dedicated by the SEA and myself in loving memory of my friend Audrey Levy. I still can't believe that she's not with us. Her Hebrew name is Chana Bat Rachel, Aleha Hashalom. She took a lot of pride in her Hebrew name. She associated with Chana, the Chana who was Shmuel's mother. We had gone to Israel together on a trip with Ricky Cohen, and she led Tefillat Chana right in the same place in Shiloh where the original Chana had prayed. And it was really a very, very moving experience. What I'd like to talk about today is Chana, Shmuel's mother, just like Audrey, our Chana. She understood the difference between fate and destiny, which is what we're going to talk about in this week's Parasha. I will describe fate and how it differs from destiny. It's something that Audrey knew and mastered, and in this week's Parasha, Yosef is going to master as well. And Miqes is all about looking on the bright side. Thank you, everybody, first of all. Gail delivered the beautiful gift. Sarah Towell, thank you. I heard you were very helpful. Not only did I get this beautiful mug, but thank you for all your gorgeous cards. Some of them are hanging behind me in my Chanukah display. I cherish every word. Thank you. And the gift was very generous as well. And I really, really appreciate that. We have each other, and I value our friendship and relationship. So thank you to everybody from the bottom of my heart. Okay, let's get started in Parashat Miqes. It's chapter 41 in Bereshit. At this point, Paro is having not one but two dreams. Before we look at the dreams, we should pay attention that the dreams are narrated first for us from the narrator, and then we hear Paro's version of his own dreams. The significance of that is that the first time we hear the dreams, it is a subjective telling of the dreams. This is how it happened. The second time we hear the dreams from Paro's perspective, this is how Paro saw and internalized what took place in his dreams. So let's first look at these dreams together, and it pays to take a minute to recognize from the words Vayhi Miqes Shnatayim Yamim, it seems to be saying that at the end of, it's not 2 days, rather possibly 2 years. Yamim are usually shanim in Torah. So after 2 years, Paro cholem, Paro has a dream, and then we see what we noticed last week. Vehineh, Paro's also dreaming a dream of prophecy. Paro's also dreaming a dream like Yosef dreamt with his vehinez. And we're going to see the vehinez ricocheting, bing, 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 all over the place throughout the Pesukim. Vehine omed al hayeor. And here, behold, he's standing on the yeor. He's not just standing by the yeor, but God is standing right next to him. And all of a sudden, vehine, from the yeor come up 7 cows. They are beautiful looking. They are healthy. They are robust. And then we have these words, vatir'ena ba'achu. It reminds us about Yosef, how he was ro'eh et echav. The word achu is spelled just like echav is spelled. And we start to get this sense that in Paro's dream, yes, he's standing at the edge of the river, and these big, beautiful cows are grazing, but there's something pulling us back to our ro'eh, which is Yosef, and how he used to also be a shepherd with his brothers. And the next verse says, Ve'ine sheva parot acherot, and then 7 other cows. These other cows, acherot, the acher, the other one, ve'echarti. An acher means an other, a rejected one, a one that isn't part of the group. So these other ones are olot acharehen. They're coming up after them from the river, and they are ra'ot mar'eh. They don't have a beautiful look about them. They are dakot basar. They are thin, but yet they still stand next to the original parot that had come up from the water. And sometimes we start to get a sense that comparisons are taking place here, that as horrible as the second bunch of cows may have been, we could only imagine next to the robust ones, they probably looked even more pitiful. Vatochalna haparot raot mar'eh. And now strange things happen, because in dreams, crazy things happen. That's the nature of dreams, that these skinny, scrawny cows, the ones who are ugly looking, they eat the 7 fat cows, the ones that were big and beautiful and robust. And vayikatz paro. And paro is jumped, from that word again, Miqes. Either, I just want you to notice how beautiful the Torah book ends. His story is Vayhi Miqes Shnatayim, and then we have Vayikatz. So it was at the end of 2 years, but at the end of his dream, Vayikatz Paro. Paro is startled. He's awakened. He is jarred, so to speak, out of his sleep. But then in verse 5, don't you worry, Vayishan, and he falls back asleep. Vayachalom shenit, he has a second dream. Vehine, no doubt, this is God in our story as well. There are 7 shibolim, olot bekane echad, 7 of these gorgeous bundles of wheat coming up in one beautiful bunch. They're biriot, they're tovot, they're healthy, they're nice and full. Vehine, and behold, 7 skinny, scrawny, shedufot kadim, tzomchot acharehem, 7 scorched, horrible bundles come up, grow up after them. And same type of story, vativlana. This time, instead of eating them into pieces, they swallow the shibolim. And a lot of the commentaries show the depiction that they literally swallowed them, that they grew up over them, that when they grew on top of them. And what was the kicker of this whole story? First, they grow up over them, and Paro once again wakes up, Vehine chalom, and behold, it was a dream. There's something interesting that's taking place here. I want to mention it at this point now. It doesn't tell us what we know later, is that after the skinny ones swallow the fat ones, whether it's the cows or the wheat, there's one very important factor to the story that's not mentioned by the narrator. The narrator doesn't tell us that the skinny cows stay skinny, look skinny, remain emaciated, even after swallowing the big fat, whatever it is that they are. So here we are. Before we go any further, I just wanted to present to you the dream, the way it's presented to us, before Paro gets a chance of giving us his own version of the story. So the first thing we have to say when we see that, here we go again, We have two dreams. This is not new to us. We are veterans of dream pairs. We had Yosef's two dreams, then we had the minister's two dreams, and now we have Paro's two dreams. So nothing about this fact that the dreams came in a pair should surprise us. We also are much smarter by now. We know that when we see the word Vehine in the dream, that it qualifies as a dream of prophecy rather than just a manifestation of our daydreams, where our daydreams become our night dreams, the things that we aspire to do or to be in the daytime, in our waking hours, manifest themselves in our evening hours. It's a Freudian interpretation of dreams. Here, the Torah is being very clear. God is in this dream because this dream contains prophecy. Not only does it contain prophecy, but we could tell from Paro's reaction, he's besides himself. He can't handle not understanding what it means because he knows he's holding inside information. Imagine God is giving him a crib sheet with all the stocks that are going to double in the next 2 weeks, but it's in hieroglyphics and he can't read it, so he can't capitalize on it. But he knows the frustration of it is he knows that he's holding information. He just can't decipher the code. And who comes along? Let's see, verse 8. Vayhi baboker, in the morning, vatepaem rucho, his ruach, his energy is completely agitated. And what happens? He sends and he calls for all his ministers and all his smart people, and nothing that they are telling him is sitting well with him. He can't seem to find a solution that satisfies him. And at this point, verse 9, Sad HaMashkim, our faithful butler, the one that Yosef had interpreted his way out of jail for him, he is the one that comes to Paro and he says, Chata'ai ani maskir hayom. I hate to do this, but I have to remind you that at one point in my life, I hit a low point. You got angry at me, Paro. You put me in the jail of Sar HaTabachim, and me and Sar HaOfim, long story short, we both dreamt a dream on one night, me and him, and this guy, somebody, was able to interpret this dream. Veshami Tanuk was there with us. There was a Na'ar Ivri Eved. There was a young lad who was a servant, who was first a Hebrew, who was a servant. The commentaries love to say that we shouldn't throw flowers at the feet of the butler for having recommended Yosef, because he recommended him in the most derogatory way that he could. He made sure to say he's too young, he's not from our nationality, he is not from our echelons. We know that a servant, a feudal system dictated that the servant could never become a master or a ruler. But anyway, he tells the story and he says, we told him our dream and it happens to be Ish kechalomo patar. Each man got his interpretation exactly the way things turned out. In verse 13, when the interpretation came about, I came to serve you, Paro, and the baker got hung. And right away, Paro sends, he calls for Yosef, he pulls him out of the bor. Let's remember that the jail, the Bet Sohar, the Sarat Tabachim that was in control of, that Bet Sohar here is called a bor, it's called a pit, it's called the same place, the same word, a deja vu of where the brothers had thrown Yosef in originally. So Yosef starts out his journey being thrown in a bor, and now he's going to come full circle by being pulled out of this bor, out of this pit, and he changes his clothes and he's brought to his shaven haircut. They make him all nice and neat, and they present him to Paro. these next words are beautiful. Verse 15 says, it starts with Paro telling us his dream. Now we have to realize the Torah doesn't waste time, doesn't waste words or syllables. And we're going to go through the entire dream a second time. And this time it's going to be from Paro's perspective. But when Paro tells his dream, he uses words. And those words have a very big effect on Yosef. Let's stop for a minute and let's say this. Of the three pairs of dreams, the only one that's privy to all three pairs is Yosef. The ministers don't know what Paro dreamt or what, maybe the second minister does know what he dreamt, but he certainly doesn't know what Yosef dreamt. Paro doesn't know what Yosef dreamt or what the ministers dreamt. So the only one here who has full knowledge of all three dreams, which must be understood all together, each dream is going to be able to explain the other dream. The way the code works, in order to find the key, we need all of the pieces. We needed the, otherwise, why do I need to know about the dreams of a butler and a baker that I'm never going to see or hear from again? I really don't need to know their entire story, unless their entire story is the way for Yosef to start to pull himself up from the abyss. And most importantly, however it is that Yosef is going to pull himself up from the abyss is going to be a recipe for us in the future to be able to pull ourselves up, should we, God forbid, find ourselves at a low point. So let's go a little bit slowly when we start to interpret these things. Let's first start to say that Paro uses these words. Chalom chalamti. Why am I smiling? Sydney, you're smiling because Yosef himself had said, chalamti chalom. This is an inversion. This is the chiastic. This is the reverse of what Yosef had done. Yosef, when he had a dream, he says, chalamti chalom to his brothers. And now all of a sudden he hears Paro telling him, he's quoting me to me, says Yosef. He's quoting me to myself because whatever it is that Paro dreamt has something to do with me personally and has something to do with my own dreams. So when he says, Chalom chalamti upoter enoto, and there's nobody that could interpret it, you know, I'm take a minute because I read beautiful on Shabbat, Rabbi David Foreman. He put out a new book this year on Bereshit, and he does a beautiful job. And he says, this Chalom chalamti, that's not the only inversion of what's taking place here. What's actually taking place is there's a series of inversions taking place. And in his series of inversions, he says, originally, Yosef was sent away by his father. And here, Paro sends for him. And we're going to see that here, Paro is going to be positioned like Yosef's father. What I mean by that, in what way does the Torah try to describe Paro as an Av, as a father? He gives him a special robe as soon as he does his interpretation. We'll see in a minute. Just like who had given him a robe? Just like his father had given him a robe. And he gives him a name. He calls him Safnat Paneach. Just like a father would give his own son a name. He also finds him a wife, just like a father would find a wife. Osnat Bat Potifera is given to Yosef by Paro. And he gives him a job. Literally, Rabbi Foreman says it adorably. He says, in the family business. So what's happening as this story unfolds is that the Torah seems to be replacing Yosef's father with Paro. He now has a new, I'll call it, father figure in his life. And the difference here, for us to appreciate it, is that everything is an inversion. Whereas his coat had been stripped from him, here his coat's being given to him. And where he had been cast in the board, now he's being rescued from the board. And this coming full circle is going to have a very big effect on Yosef and his understanding. I'm bringing Yaakov and the brothers into the dream of Paro because it's pivotal for Yosef to see himself in Paro's dream. If he can't see himself in Paro's dream, not only won't he understand Paro's dream, but he won't understand what the realities were in his own dreams. Let's talk about it. Now we bit off a couple of pieces. We didn't talk about what Paro had seen and how he had said it, but maybe I'll take one or two verses and then I'll back up for you. So Paro in verse 17 tells Yosef, Bachalomi, in my dream, hineni, remember that word hine, vehine? He's going to use the word hineni omed al sefat hayeor. We need to know what the word hineni means. If you went to kindergarten and the teacher's taking attendance, she calls out your name, what do you say? Hineni. But what does hineni really mean? Do we have an idea of what that word, what a power that word, it packs a punch. It means hineni, I am here, but I'm not just here, I'm not just present. I am here and present with my hine. I am here and present with my godliness, with my potential, with my ability. I am hineni, Paro is saying, you know, when Paro says it, and Paro is the king, he's saying, I am standing at the edge of the river next to God with my godly given powers or honors or station, and I'm standing there. So he's sort of begging Yosef. He's saying, God's sending me a message. He's giving me direction. I just can't understand it. And he keeps going and he says, Vehine min hayeor. He keeps using that Vehine word as much as it was in his dream. And he starts talking that the 7 beautiful cows came up and they were also grazing, Vatir'ena ba'achu, and then 7 ones came up after them, and they were skinny. They were so skinny, he adds, that I have never seen such a horrible looking bunch of cows ever, like never have been seen in all of Egypt. La ro'a, of horror. And then what happens? The skinny cows, now this he's saying, and it wasn't in the original story, to his knowledge and his perception of the dream. What happens? The 7 parot rakot in verse 20, the skinny cows, they eat up the 7 big first beautiful cows. Verse 21 is totally news to us. Vatavona el kirbena, when they came into their intestines, once they were inside of the skinny cows, velo nodaki ba'u, we had no idea that they had ever even come in to their kirbena, and they still looked as horrible as they had looked from the onset. Okay, I have to press the pause button right here. So, and just so you know, if you have your Chumash in front of you, the next thing that's going to take place is the next dream is going to be recounted with the sheep. So this the same idea that's happening with the cows is happening with the sheep, but Yosef is hearing something different entirely. What is Yosef hearing when he hears Paro telling his dream? Right away, he hears there's 6 good ones and there's 6 bad ones. There's 6 beautiful ones, there's 6 ugly ones, and they're standing side by side. Who do you think he's thinking of? He is hearing his own life story in front of him. Paro is dreaming Yosef's life. Yosef sees through Paro that the 7 good ones, do you remember the Ro'im Ba'achu? Remember when they were, excuse me, Excuse me. When Yosef was grazing with his brothers, do you remember what it had said in the beginning of Parashat Vayeshev? It said, Haya ro'eh et echav batzon, vehu na'ar et bnei bilha ve'et bnei zilpa, nishe aviv. So automatically, and it even uses the words, Vayave Yosef et dibatam ra'ah, the skinny other brothers, the ones that weren't from the sons of Leah, they were the ones that had ra'ah about them. In the original story, they were bringing evil things or bad things. Everything about them was bad. What is he seeing? What is he hearing? Paro is hearing that Yosef was part of the ugly cows. Him, let's do it, Yosef, let's say Binyamin, and then you had the sons of the Shefachot, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. You're going to tell me, Vivien, that's only 6. I will tell you that if you wanted to get to 7, you could replace Yosef with Ephraim and Menashe, which Yaakov himself is going to do. So you have 7 skinny, scrawny brothers on one side. And who do you have on the other side? You have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, Zevulun. And you're going to tell me I'm missing 7. So if I had to use a poetic license, I would say don't forget about Dinah. She was one of the children of Leah as well. And if I had to, and it doesn't have to fit perfectly, but it does, we have 7 pitted against 7. And what's Yosef hearing? While Paro is telling his dreams about the cows being swallowed up, Yosef is finally hearing the dreams from the perspective of his brothers. He's finally hearing and putting himself in the shoes of his brothers, and he's saying, I'm getting to hear my dream. I'm getting to be an audience. I'm getting to feel how my brothers felt when they heard my dream. How does Paro's dream afford that to Yosef? Yosef sees that the brothers probably felt when Yosef said that he was in the middle of the field and all their bundles were bowing down to him, or that he was in the middle of, I don't know where, the sky, and all the sun and the moon and the stars were bowing down to him. Did he stop for a minute and wonder how the other brothers felt? Did he stop for a minute and think to themselves that Yosef is looking to swallow them up? And when they swallow them, when he swallows them up, there's going to be no remnants, no evidence that they ever existed. So from the brother's perspective, Yosef is now standing in their shoes and he's saying, holy moly, I now understand why my brothers got so hysterical, why my brothers thought this was a matter of life and death, why my brothers felt that if they didn't do away with me, it was a matter of survival. Haba lehargecha, hashkem lehorgo. They had a legal footing. They felt that Yosef wanted to swallow them up and they would be totally obliterated. He's seeing this from Paro's dreams, but he's even smarter than that, because he's not just referencing his own dreams and how his brothers felt about his claiming that he's Hamashol Timshol Banu, Hamaloch Timloch Aleinu. Those words, he didn't really process them fully until he brought in the dreams of the butler and the baker. The butler and the baker, again, Yosef is going through an education here. He's going through a dream interpreting course 101. When he first dreamt his first dreams, he didn't know what he knew after the ministers, because after the ministers we discussed last week, he learned a couple of important techniques. He learned that units in the dream represent time. 3 vines is 3 days. 3 baskets is 3 days. Because we're going to see here now the 7 cows is going to be 7 years. He's going to understand that. And as he understands that, he says to himself, hey, wait a minute. Maybe the units in my dream also played a role. Maybe those 11 stars plus the 11 stalks, which equals 22, maybe the dream was that in 22 years, my brothers are going to come and bow down to me, which is exactly what happens. Because he's 17 when he leaves his brothers. He's 30 when they place a crown on his head. That's 13 years. Then we have the 7 years of aplenty, which takes us to 20 years. And on the 2nd year of famine is when his brothers come to bow down to him. So if only he had gone to the seminar that taught him that units represent time, Yosef would have understood at 17 that he's not going to be king immediately over them. He also would have understood the most important part of the dream, which is what he's going to use now. He understood that the dreams are only a picture, that they don't hold in them. It's not a guarantee. It's God showing him all this can be yours. But what did he learn from the butler? You have to make it happen. You have to want it, and you have to make it. That butler must have been thinking day and night, how the heck am I going to get out of here? And how am I going to get back on track and back into that palace? I miss my job. I miss my friends. I miss my life. What am I going to do to get there? How can I get there? And if he's thinking about this all day long, he's dreaming about it at night. And we had said in his dream, he was so active. He was busy. He was coming. He was hustling. He was going. And what happens? He gets there. So Yosef says, holy moly, all this time that I was thinking that I'm going to be king, I didn't realize the aspect that I have to make it happen. It's not just going to happen on its own. And what happens if I do nothing like the baker? What happens if I just sit there like a lump on a log with bread that I don't know how it showed up there, just showed up on my head and birds are picking at it and I'm not even getting rid of the birds. I'm just sitting there totally inactive. What happens to Yosef when he finally learns this lesson? Well, he's going to take all this information and use it to his advantage now when he's going to interpret Paro's dreams. So let's just talk a minute. We had said the way Chana, our Chana, and Chana, Shmuel's mother, and Yosef now, they all have this newfound knowledge that they have to put into effect. And the newfound knowledge is being able to understand that there is a clear distinction between fate and destiny. I'm going today to define the word fate as believing that things that happen are outside of my control. It's my fate. I don't control it. People who believe that the world operates on fate, that things just happen and there's a master plan in the world and they just are going along for the ride, those people are immediately rendered inactive because they believe that things are decided, things are determined for them, and there's no place for them as their life unfolds. I'm going to use a different word. I'm going to use the word destiny. Destiny is something completely different. I might say it's even opposite of, fate and destiny. We throw the words together. I'm using this word. It's the best one I have in my vocabulary. Hopefully, I was looking for a counterpart in Hebrew for these words, and I'm still not there yet. But for the English, I'm going to use the word destiny. And I'm going to use it to say destiny means that we play a starring role in our own lives. We decide who we are meant to become. We are the authors of our history. Yosef learns this. He thought his dreams were about fate. This is going to be my fate. Everybody's going to be bowing down to me. He forgot to add the destiny part. He forgot to add the part that I have to make it happen. That's a very important part of the story. And why do I bring Hannah into the story? Because she could have sat back. We don't have enough time for her whole story, but she was married to Elkanah. She had no children. Her rival wife, Penina, is popping out another kid every 9 months, and she is barren. And she could have sat back and she could have said, C'est la vie. This is my fate. What do you want from me? God stopped me from having children. And instead, she decided to hop aboard the destiny train. She decided to hop aboard the train where she says, what the heck? I don't have to accept this. I have the ability to decide what my future is going to be. I have 2 feet. I have lips that could move. I have a brain that could pray. And she does something very, very I'm going to say even risque for her time. Women didn't show up in Shiloh, but yet she shows up and she prays to God. And she says, okay, God, here's the deal. You give me a child and I will dedicate him to you all the days of his life. He will be in your service. And she makes a deal with God. And the Kohen Gadol thinks she's nuts or drunk specifically. But guess what? 9 months later, she shows up. She has a kid, and a couple of years later, she brings him in and she says, hey, this is the kid that I had prayed for. And so this idea that we can take matters into our own hands, that we should not look at life and the cards we've been dealt and feel that things are, there's a word, maktub, things are already written and sealed, right? Like Yul Brynner, so shall it be written, so shall it be done. No, says Torah, and no, says Yosef. Even the line that I love when he tells the Sad Hamashkim, as the Sad is going to leave the prison, he says, please put in a good word for me. And he says, Ki ganov gunavti, I was stolen. I'm an object. I'm inanimate. I had no control over what happened to me. This is what he was saying back then. I was stolen from the land of the Ivrim. And he says, Vegam po lo asiti me'uma. I did nothing. I'm innocent. I'm a victim. Kisamu oti babor. The same way I was an innocent victim when they put me in a board with my brother. I'm an innocent victim when they put me here. But guess what? Just in voicing that statement, lo asiti me'uma, I've done nothing. I don't want to add, I've done nothing wrong. I think Yosef hears himself. It's like going to therapy. When you hear yourself say something, it sounds differently when you say it out loud to somebody else than when you say it to yourself in your own mind. All this time, he was saying, I'm a victim, I don't deserve this, I did nothing. I didn't do anything, I didn't lay a finger on Potiphar's wife, and I really didn't deserve what my brothers did. I'm a victim. And by saying these words out loud, lo asiti me'uma, maybe he heard something else in his own voice. Maybe he heard himself say, what did I do about it? The Viktor Frankl, I can't control what other people do to me, but I can control how I react. Lo asiti me'uma, I haven't yet reacted. And by saying that, he's able to say, okay, my reaction starts here. My reaction starts now. Please put a good word when you go to the king and tell him that I'm rotting away here in jail. Now, I know that a lot of the commentaries aren't so happy with it, and they say, no, he ended up there 2 years longer because he counted on the Sad Hamashkim to save him instead of putting his faith in God. I will hold very close and dear to my heart that you got to try everything. You have to pray to God, and you have to ask the Sad Hamashkim, and whatever God gives you as a possible tool to get out of the bor, you need to use every single tool, because at the end of the day, it is this Sad Hamashkim, this minister of the butlery, that does take him out. So it is successful. All that aside, let's move forward and let's see what happens with Yosef. So Yosef now here's the dream of Paro. Let's go back to our Parasha Miqes. Sorry. Okay, now Yosef responds. I'm going to just skip right ahead and go to the part where Yosef responds. Verse 25, chapter 41. Yosef tells Paro, okay, Paro, let's establish one thing. Chalom Paro echadhu. This dream is one. You think you had two dreams. By a chalom shenit, you think they're two separate dreams. I'll tell you from now, let's start with the premise that they're both one dream. Of course, the word echad is very, very important for our story, because all we're looking for constantly with Yosef and his brothers is the echad, the sense of achdut. This is something that's going to be elusive to Yosef his entire career. He's going to constantly want to be echad till his dying day. His brothers still till the end. You're going to cry at the end of Vayechi when you see what his brothers tell him, that they still don't see him as one of them. So as he's unpacking the dream of Paro, he's unpacking his own state of affairs, and he's saying this is an opportunity for us to be echad, for us to be one again. And you'll notice that throughout the story, the brothers are each called the echad. Shimon gets taken, he's the echad. Binyamin gets taken, he's the echad. Yosef is missing in the retelling of the story, he is the echad. And the beautiful part of understanding that is that they cannot be echad if one of them is missing. Unless everybody is present and accounted for, we used this metaphor last week, like a Sefer Torah. If one brother is missing, broken, or in any way not whole, then they as an entirety are pasul. They are not complete. And so what is Yosef telling Paro? He says, it's one dream, but it's also the ability for us to unite, for us to become one. Remember the me'almim alumim, when they were tying the sheaves, the bundles together, the whole idea for Paro, for Yosef to be able to reign and be a ruler, for anybody to be a ruler over the Jewish people, the Jewish people need to have this sense of achdut, the sense of together, the sense of echad, the sense of unity. And Yosef goes on to interpret the dream. And we know his interpretation. He says, you're going to have 7 good, healthy years, represented by the beautiful 7 fat cows. And they're going to be followed by 7 years of hunger. Of hunger that's going to be so horrible that you've never seen. Egypt has never seen a hunger like this before in their lives. And now here is where Yosef, he goes off the script completely. Listen, we hired you, we gave you a shave and a haircut, we brought you to the king. Thank you very much. We asked you to interpret a dream, and now you're going rogue on us, because after interpreting the dream, Yosef is bringing his other dreams to the party. He's bringing in his own dreams. He's bringing in the butler's dream and the baker's dream. What is he saying? He's saying, I'm not here just to interpret the dream. This Paro had this dream so that my dreams could fully manifest themselves. And so now I have to script my own ending. And so what does he do in verse 33? He says, first in verse 32, he says, and by the way, the fact that you had 2 dreams means that God, memaher ha'elohim le'asoto, This is going to start to come fast and furious. In other words, if you're putting these dates in a calendar, today is the first day of the 7 good years. And he says, Ve'ata, and now let Paro seek out an ish navon vechacham, a smart, wise, discerning man, and let him appoint him over Eretz Mitzrayim. And you know what else Paro should do? Vayafked pekidim. We know these words, Vayafked hamelech pekidim. We know them from Megillat Esther. We know when we read these words that the wind of change is blowing and that now there is a new page, a new chapter taking place. So Yosef says, appoint pekidim. Oh, there's so much to say about pekidim, but for now, I'll just say that Yosef himself embraces those words because he says, Pakod yivkod Elohim etchem. This time in this story, the king that is appointing ministers to save the people from ruin is being introduced with these words, but later on, at the end of his life, Yosef says there's another king. That king is God. And he's gonna pakod yivkod Elohim etchem. He's also gonna have this double usage word. And those of you who know me know I love the word pakad, but I don't have enough time, so I'll just say it as quickly as I can. When he uses these words, and the words pakod, pakadati, are going to be used throughout the Exodus and throughout the saving of the Jewish people. And they're starting here. This is the beginning of our stay in Egypt. It's going to start with these words and it's going to end with these words, but the Torah wants us to not despair. It never wants us to despair. And it wants us to understand that in the same way that Paro is appointing ministers, it's also telling us God's manipulating even this detail. The way, our first pakad, the way that God pakadet Sarah, the way God remembered Sarah and gave her a child against all odds. Yosef, the Na'ar, Eved Ivri, the one who's a lad, who's a Jew, who's a servant, which could never rise to power, all the impossible things that you thought in the physical world were impossible are now going to start to become possible. And they're now going to start to manifest themselves. And they're going to start with these words because the, excuse me. Because the, because the Torah wants us to know that everything that's going to take place henceforth is going to have the hand of God in it. And don't let anything surprise you. Expect the unexpected, reader. When you see Vayavked Pekidim al Haaretz, you could be darn sure that the craziest things are going to happen, are about to happen. And of course, what does Paro say? And this is beautiful in verse 38. Paro says, Hanimtza kaze ish, is this such a person? Asher ruach Elohim bo, that has the spirit of God? And he tells Yosef, now that Elohim has revealed all of this to you, I'm convinced, ein navon v'chacham kamocha, there is nobody as discerning and as wise as you. Atat tihyeh al beti, you're going to be the one in charge of my house. And anything you say, by your word is the law, and only my kiseh, only my throne is going to be higher than your throne. And what does Paro do? He says, here I give you all of Mitzrayim. He takes off his ring and he gives it to Yosef and he dresses him in linen clothing and he puts a beautiful gold necklace on him and he rides him in the special chariots. A lot of people make comparisons of Yosef to Mordechai because Mordechai also receives the signet ring and also rides on chariots and is also given special clothing. I'd like for today to do something a little different. It interests me, so I hope it'll interest you. I'd like to talk about the fact that Paro gives Yosef a linen coat. To what do I need? Why do I need to know? Of what interest is it to me that Yosef's coat that Paro gave him was made of linen? All of a sudden, we're all fashionistas. All of a sudden, we have to know exactly who wore it best. I think the Torah is telling us something here, and it's telling us something very important. We had started by saying it seems like Paro is restoring the mantle of leadership that was stripped from Yosef. He's now recloaking him so that he could once again be poised to be a leader. And that says, I see Linda, yes, the Kohanim wore linen. We're going to go even one higher than the Kohanim. Thank you, Joel. Wait till you hear the rest of this. So stay with me. It's going to go around the corner before we get to where we have to go. But I'd like to suggest that the coat was made of linen because who would wear a coat made of linen? Let's start with that. Let's start with the easier one. If this coat was made of linen and you had to guess, what do you think the ketonet pasim was made out of? If you had to make the label and sew it into the back over there that it says what it's made out of, what do you think that coat was made out of? The ketonet pasim, I would like to suggest, again, I'm taking a poetic license here, but they were shepherds. And as shepherds, it would make a ton of sense that they had sheep, and sheep give wool. And I would think that the coat that his father gave him was made out of wool. And now here, he has a coat that's made out of linen. Anybody with me on this? If I had to say, what do the two coats represent? I might say that if Cain wore a coat, his coat would probably be made out of linen because he was a farmer. And if Hevel wore a coat, being a shepherd, he would probably be wearing a coat made out of wool. And all of a sudden, we start to look and say to ourselves, hold on a minute. Hevel, let me just, I want to say it in the right way. All this time, okay, let's say it differently. The most important thing that had to happen in interpreting the dreams was that Yosef had to stand in his brother's shoes. That Yosef had to literally see things from their perspective. And the whole time that he was in one board or another, one pit or one dumps or another, all that time, he kept thinking, as long as he was wearing the coat of wool that his father gave him, he thought he was the Hevel persona. He was the victim, and he thought that his brothers were the oppressors and his brothers were the tormentors. And they did oppress and they did torment him, but he never saw what he was to his brothers. And we started to say, he, according to this dream, he was looking to swallow up his brothers and they were afraid that no remnants would be left of them. So when the Torah comes and tells us that now he's able to wear the coat of linen, it's going to sound bad for a minute, so don't sign off yet. The coat of linen means he's wearing the coat of Cain. Wearing the coat of Cain would mean that he's not the innocent victim that he thought he was. It would mean that he has to be able to see himself also as the tormentor. Maybe I'll take a step back. If you ever have a fight with somebody, two people, lo yachlu dabro leshalom, two people have nothing left to say to each other. They can't even speak to each other peacefully. I have nothing to say to her. And why is that? Is because you're seeing how you were wronged and you're seeing your place and your position, and you're so strong on that. Look, there's two sides or three to every story. You can't see their side. You can't see the other person's perspective. And now what Yosef, the Me'asef, the one who has to unify, the one who has to bring everybody together, he's being forced to do something. Yes, your father gave you the coat of wool. He gave you the coat of the shepherd. He gave you the coat of Hevel, but you took it to mean that you were a victim. You're not the victim. Paro is going to give you a coat here that's going to be the coat of the oppressor. And I saw some of the comments in the chat, and I'd like to say that one person, only one person on planet Earth is able to wear both coats. Only one person is able to wear those two fibers at the same time. And that one person is the Kohen Gadol, the Ohev Shalom and Rodef Shalom. He's able to show that he could see his own position and the other person's position at the same time. He could realize that he's the victim, but in some way, he also played a role that caused somebody to be upset with him. And the only person who could do that is the Kohen Gadol. He's giving a model for all of us here today and saying, to be Yosef HaTzadik, to be a tzaddik means to be able to see the entire story, to see the whole of the picture, whereas sometimes you've been wronged, but maybe you've also wronged somebody else. And I'm going to move forward from this, but I think this is going to be the start of Yosef's career, that now that he's wearing this coat of linen, now he could have more sympathy. Now he could start to feel what his brothers may have felt. And now the redemption is going to come through here. And as we move forward through the story, I think it's very beautiful. Right on the next page, by the time we get to verse 51, we see that Yosef has two children. And now he's able to start to process everything he's learned in the names that he gives his two children. The first child he calls, the Bechor, he calls Menashe. The word Nashe, like Gid Hanashe, Menashe, Nashani, very often means to forget, but it also means to be displaced, like the Gid Hanashe. It also means to be dislocated, like the Gid Hanashe. And we start to get a picture, a window into Yosef's life. He is displaced and he is dislocated. And he names his first son, Nashani Elohim et kol amali. God has helped me forget all of my pain and my troubles in the house of my father. Don't forget, the minute he's in Egypt, he's wearing a gorgeous robe, he's wearing a gorgeous necklace, he has a ring on his finger, they're fanning him, feeding him grapes, he's living the life. And what's he remembering? He's remembering his old life, and it seems like with the name of Menashe, he's saying good riddance to all of that. I am so over that. I am so out of there. I want nothing to do with that. Rabbi Sachs often cites the Hansen law. The Hansen law talks about immigrants and how the first generation of immigrants wants to forget their past. They want to be able to assimilate, to acculturate. They don't want people to know that they came from somewhere else. They change their clothes as quickly as they can. They give themselves names that are most indicative of this new place that they're at. And then it's the second generation that actually wants to remember what the first generation tried to forget. There becomes this nostalgic element. There becomes this yearning for the same language or for the foods or for the culture that was left behind. But that happens with the second generation. And so in the beginning, Moshe with Menashe, he feels that he's dislocated. He feels like he is displaced. But initially, he's actually happy about it. The next verse, verse 52, he has a second son and he calls that son Ephraim. And for that son, he says, Hifrini Elohim be'eretzoni. God has made me fruitful, but this land is a land of my poverty. This land is not the land of what I thought it was. I think it was Rabbi Sachs also who had said, when we come to exile, the trappings of exile are actually a trap. We have all of these luxuries, and the luxuries end up trapping us and fooling us into believing that this place is our home because we're so comfortable here. But what Yosef is saying when he has his second son is he's saying, even though I have all of these beautiful things, this land is really a place of my suffering. So I'm going to end with this thought, and I think it's part of Yosef's genius, and I'm sorry that we don't have time to go too much further, but I'll say this. During the 7 good years, Yosef wasn't the only genius who stored up wheat. Everybody knew the dream of Paro, and everybody knew the snowstorm is coming, and everybody gathered up provisions. They were all very smart. They weren't at all lax in preparing for the inevitable. The difference was that Yosef understood something very pivotal. He understood that in order for something or someone, be it corn, wheat, or people, in order for us to survive, we have to take some of what we were raised with and keep it with us in our new place. Yosef knew an agricultural trick, and I believe he knew it, understood it from his own experience, because nobody else in Egypt did this. In the storehouses that had corn or wheat, what did he do? He took some of the earth, some of the ground that wheat or corn was grown in, and he stored it in the storehouse. And that's why his wheat storehouses and his corn storehouses did not rot, but everybody else's did. Because he realized about himself, he can't be just Menashe. He can't just be dislocated and disassociated from his past. He must connect and keep a part of his past together with him in order for him to thrive in this new place. In this new existence, where I'm no longer attached to my ground that I came from, I have to do whatever I can to bring some of my previous self. Like if we ever go to Israel, I don't know about you, but I travel very light, only carry on. So I can't bring back a lot of things, but I always try to bring back spices, for instance. I like to bring a little bit of a flavor from Eretz Israel back with me. I actually think that the Midrash that says that Yosef went down to Egypt and they took him in a caravan of spices so that he wouldn't have an odor and stink. I think it also meant, I'd like to think that the commentaries were saying he went down with spices from the land so that he would never forget where he comes from, his origins. Actually, to take it one step further, when Binyamin is being sent back against Yaakov's better thinkings, against his best opinion, Yaakov tells the brothers, if you're going to go back to Egypt, then why don't you take mizimrat haaretz with you? Take some of the produce from this land with you. In other words, you can't leave completely. You can't sever ties completely from the place that you came from. You need to take something. You know, people take a pillow with them. They take something. You need to take something that grounds you. I'll just use this last example. I know my time is up, but I'll be quick. Cain, what's his punishment? His punishment is you're not going to be grounded. You're going to be navinad. You're going to have to wander without having any footing. You're not going to have a grounded sense to yourself because you're never going to have any of the ground that you came from. Yosef, knowing this, realizes a very important truth, and that's why immediately what happens when he notices this? The minute that he does see his brothers, rather than have any animosity towards them, he realizes that as much as they need him to sustain them, because it is a time of famine, and the Mesopotamian region in Egypt was the only place that had food. As much as they needed him, he realized that he depended on them, that he was dependent on them. In order for him to be balanced, he needed part of his own earth, of his own makeup to come together with him. And so as we come to a close, I'm sorry, there's a lot more to say. Please read the Parasha on your own. There's so much intrigue that takes place. It's fantastic. I will say, because it is Hanukkah, so I would like to suggest, in honor of the Hanukkah holiday and the Hashmonaim and the Maccabim, I'd like to say for certain that one of the messages that Parashat Miqes comes to teach us is that, first of all, if you want to say you only need a pach shemen, you only need a spark, you only need one little ignition, one little thing to be ignited to get an entire beautiful, bright light. What really I think Parashat Miqes starts to tell us is that the way that the Maccabim understood that whatever they were going through, the experiencing that they were, the circumstances that they were experiencing, that was not their fate. They were from the Kohanim family. They were able to wear shatnez. They were able to wear linen and wool together. They were able to understand that the physical and the spiritual is also together. The way wool and linen, two totally opposite fibers, come together, so too the spiritual and the physical. Those two must be enmeshed. If we want to take our current fate and have a say and decide that we're going to author what's going to take place here, and the reason that we could pick up the pen and write our own chapter the way we want to see it is because we are a people that is infused with Vehineh. God is literally at the turn of every corner as long as we invite him into our story. So as we're offering our stories, as we're authoring our own stories, don't forget, insert the word Vehineh. Insert the idea that God's presence allows us to take our determined fate and turn it into our own decided future. I hope and I pray that this Hanukkah, our entire world is enlightened, is purified, is blessed, and we, the children of Yaakov, the ones who are reading about all these pakods, about all these miracles that can happen in the physical world, I hope that we are the beneficiaries of all of this blessing that is right here. All we have to do is reach out and take it. So I thank you all. And for those of you who joined a little later, once again, thank you for your beautiful words, your Hanukkah gift, your sentiments. A special refuah shalema to Leah Bat Yittel. And I wish you all a beautiful, beautiful week. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate being able to spend this time together with all of you. I am going to unmute you in case anybody has any comments that they want to share.
Thank you, Vivien.
Hi,
Very nice.
Andy, Florida. That sounds like you. Is that you?
It's me, exactly.
Hi. I'm seeing the beautiful, beautiful chats that everybody wrote. Thank you. May the light of Hashem enter all your lives. That's from Linda.
Thank you, Vivien.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vivien. Yashikoah. May all your prayers reach Hakifim Kabel. God bless you.
Thank you,
A minute.
Vivien.
Did everybody
for the
see what
novel
Robin
insight.
Shalmay wrote? Did everybody see what Robin Shalmay wrote? Linen wrinkles and its look doesn't last. I love that. I thought that was very clever. It's in the chat. And Linda Kingsburg wrote Shatner's sibling rivalry. One day I hope to do a class on showing how Shatner's shows that the siblings actually coming together. But only the Kohen Gadol could wear it. There'll be time, God willing, that we all could. Linda, thank you. You always add great posts. Celeste restoring his stripping dignity. I love that. That's great. And thank you for everybody for all of your comments that you entered. Thank you.
Vivien, can you ever think about
Thank
doing
you
like
very much.
a longer
Thank you for
class?
everything and the novel insights.
Thank you, Gail.
Beautiful class as always. We love you.
Thank you.
Happy holiday.
Now I can see
Bye,
everybody.
Hanukkah Sameach.
Thank you.
Hanukkah,
Rochelle, was that you speaking? Rochelle Levy?
Yes,
I heard your
Vivi.
voice. How are you?
Good, sweetheart. Listen, when I used to teach art, I used to teach a 3-hour class. Other
Wow.
people taught 2 hours, but it's not worth it. And the girls used to come at like 20 minutes before just to set up, because it took 20 minutes to set up. I really think you should do like a supersonic class at least once, a month, and teach longer.
You mean like a marathon?
No, you're just amazing. God bless you. And wow, it's just, I came in late. I'm sorry, but I had a phone call I had to attend to. But really,
don't worry, I'm oblivious. I don't know what. I have great.
I know, but really, I saw 101 people. Mashallah, Kenya, unbelievable.
Amen. Thank you all. It's really, really a pleasure. And maybe one day we'll do a marathon. I don't know how many hours you could handle it, but I could go on forever. Please give a shot on your own. It's really exciting.
Thank you.
Hi, Viv.
Hi, Ma. Where are you?
Right here.
Oh, I see just your box. Come on, Abwe. Come on,
Hi.
show yourself.
I love your collection. It's growing.
Oh, you see, I put out a couple of my dreidels in the background.
Yes, yeah, we did.
Oh,
Yeah. Thank you. Hi, Yafa. I see you too.
That's great.
Yes,
See you later.
I wish we could have our personal shiurim already with you
Amen. Amen. Me too. It'll be soon. It's coming.
soon.
Hakod Yivkod. Hashem is going to send us together soon.
Amen. Chag Sameach.
and
Chag Sameach. Have a great day, everybody.
You too.
Enjoy the week.
Thank you.
And thank you again. God willing, we'll be together next week.
Amen. Amen.
Take care.
Bye.